On episode 12 of the Camp Owners Podcast, Kelly and I sit down and discuss registration for 2021 with David Miller from Camp Starlight and Jeff Bradshaw from Camp Wenonah. All things registration and the things all camp owners should be thinking about as we prepare for next summer.
Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We're going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Welcome, I'm Kelly Shuna. I am the co-owner and director of Hidden Pines Ranch, a day camp in Stillwater, Minnesota.
Hi, everybody. I'm Howie Grossinger, and I'm the co-owner of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto.
If you're looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/COP or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful for other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen.
Well, this is a great opportunity at the beginning of our show, Kelly, to thank our amazing sponsor. We want to give a huge shout out to Camp Brain. They've been an amazing sponsor over our first season and now continuing into our second. Camp Brain is camp management software which serves over 1,300 camps. They've been doing this since 1994 with 45 plus dedicated staff to meet your every need. Not only will Camp Brain make you love your software, but your parents will love their registration experience too. As someone, and I've mentioned this in other shows, I'm a proud Camp Brain user, and I think the moment we turned to our online registration with our families, they just absolutely loved it, and we've been tweaking it and getting the support of the Camp Brain staff every year to make that experience of onboarding our customers really smooth and easy. So if you're interested in Camp Brain and you're looking for something new in the camp management software world, we encourage you to check them out at campbrain.com or call 866-485-8885.
All right. Well, today on episode 12, we have two seasoned camp owners with us to share their 2020 experiences and to give us some perspective on the trends they are seeing in the 2021 registration. Both of our guests operate overnight camps and can provide a unique perspective on their approaches to getting their campers to return in 2021 and what they're doing to attract new ones. Howie and I are happy to welcome David Miller from Camp Starlight in Pennsylvania and Jeff Bradshaw from Camp Jeff, I didn't even practice this prior, so I hope that I am saying your camp right. Otherwise, forgive me. I'm going to go Wenonah. Yes. All right. Camp Wenonah in Bracebridge, Ontario. All right. So welcome, Jeff and David.
Welcome, guys. Really nice to have you. Kelly and I are really excited about this conversation. I'm really excited to have Jeff and David because I've crossed paths with David at various conferences over years, and Jeff and I are long-standing colleagues in the Ontario and Canadian camping scene. So it's going to be really nice for you, Kelly, to get to know them and for our listeners as well. At the beginning of every show, we ask each of our guests to introduce themselves and allow our listeners to get to know them a little better. So I thought, David, that we would start with you. Perhaps you could share with our listeners a little bit about your journey and your experience in ownership of Starlight.
Sure, happy to do so. First of all, Kelly and Howie, thanks for inviting me on. I'm very pleased to be here. So I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, and I started going to camp in Maine from the time I was 8 years old. I started at a small all-boys camp called Camp Belgrade, and then moved to Camp Tuckahoe, which is a relatively large all-boys camp. And I spent 9 years as a camper and 4 as a staff member, and I loved camp. I'm one of those stories where it was always my dream to become a camp director. While I was in college, I met my then-to-be wife. We were dating, and she said, I want to go backpacking through Europe this summer. I said, I need to go back to camp for one more summer because I'm taking my boys on a Western trip. I said, but I'll get you a job at a camp nearby because Tuckahoe wasn't hiring women or girls at the time. I got her, and then the following summer, I promised we'll go backpacking through Europe. So she got a job at a girls' camp. I worked at Tuckahoe, took my boys out west, And then the next summer we went backpacking through Europe. And then every summer we were living in New York, we would go up to Maine and visit my camp. And every single summer I would say to her, I really want to buy a camp. And she would say, get your head examined. What do you mean you want to buy a camp? I said, it's a business. I think we'd be really good at it. And no led to the summer of 1998, where we were with our 3-year-old daughter. She was trying lobster for the first time at the Naples Lobster Pound. And I said, Allison, I really want to buy a camp. And she said, go for it. And for those people who know me, go for it means go for it. And literally within 8 to 10 weeks, we were buying Camp Starlight. We have been we've been married for 32 years, and we've been business partners here at Camp Starlight for 22 years. So this would have been, and we were here. So this was our 22nd summer as the owners of Camp Starlight.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think, Kelly, we just got David as a future guest on how to, for those of us in this call who work with our spouses and our partners, and we could do a whole show and we could bring our partners on and reveal a lot of fun, juicy stuff, I'm sure, about that working relationship. But that's a great story, David. And tell us maybe briefly a little bit about Starlight in terms of how long Starlight's been around, perhaps your clientele, what market are you in, et cetera, just before we ask Jeff to tell his great story.
Absolutely. Camp Starlight was founded in 1947 by 3 brothers. They were the Schmierer brothers. 2 of the older brothers were both pediatricians, one in Brooklyn and one on Long Island. And then their younger brother was a teacher, and he became the camp director. And so for years, through their practices of being pediatricians, they were just funneling kids in here. It's a brother-sister co-ed camp. Brother-sister a little bit more than co-ed, even though we share the dining room, our meals are together. But even at our lake, everything else, we have 2 sets of basketball courts and tennis courts. And so the boys and girls don't do anything together during the day, but we eat our meals together, and we do some of our evening activities together for that brother-sister feeling. So they ran the camp until 1999. The older 2 brothers were ill and in their 90s. Hai, the brother who ran the camp with his wife, was 79 years old, and they were looking to retire. And they really were looking for a couple that were going to, what we call we say we wrap our arms around the traditions that have been here since 1947. So we take it very seriously. We feel it's our turn to hold the torch. And at some point we'll pass that torch on, maybe to our daughter or son, but that's kind of our philosophy here. And so we run 1 7-week sleepaway camp session. We run 550 kids, half boys and half girls, and everybody is here for the full 7 weeks. We have a staff, including support staff and division leaders and key staff, of about 300. So we are feeding about 850 people, 3 meals a day for 50 days.
Yeah. Wow. Big operation.
Our clientele mostly come from the New York metropolitan area, the 3-hour driving distance, the Gilligan's Island 3-hour tour, from Philly and the New York metropolitan area, Long Island, Westchester, New Jersey. And then we have a really nice group from South Florida, and then sprinkled around some kids from Chicago, about 8 kids from California. And that's really what our clientele makeup is.
Well, thank you for that. I know that our audience really loves to hear sort of the makeup of our guests and just the diversity in camp operation and what we have both in day camp and overnight camp. Okay, Jeff Bradshaw, welcome to the show. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your journey in camping.
I'd love to. Thank you. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Howie. Hi, David. Looked forward to this for a while. I guess easy to say I was a camp kid, and I suppose I still am. I remember going to camp when I was very young. My first year was 1968. And like a lot of my friends growing up, I went to summer camp. And then during high school and university, I worked at summer camp. And the difference was, as my friends kept growing up, I kept going back to summer camp. I thought I'd be a teacher. That was really my goal for education. And what I really wanted to do was be a high school teacher. And for some reason, I just kept getting pulled back and back into camp. And so that became my life and my passion. I directed camp programs in the 80s for the YMCA. both day and overnight camp programs here in Canada. And then I found myself shifting a little bit. For 3 years, I directed a camp called the Ontario Cystic Fibrosis Camp. So a program for children with CF, with cystic fibrosis, run in conjunction with the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. So that was remarkable and life-changing in so many ways. And then also I directed an Anglican church camp for 6 years, Camp Couchiching, just north of Toronto. But I kind of had that bug. I knew I wanted to, at some point, own a camp. And so spent some time looking to see what was out there, had lots of good conversations. And in 1996, I set it on my own. And we found a property about 2 hours north of Toronto. It had been built as a camp in the early 60s and ran for about 7 years. And then for almost 25 years, it was just rented out. So a group here for a week, a group there. And we said, you know what? Maybe we should start a brand new camp. And so one of the things I'll be eternally grateful for is just being at that point a part of the camp community as a younger leader, when Howie and I were much younger than we are now. And a lot of folks that would be familiar names to Canadians like Jack Pierce and Larry Bell and Jane McCutcheon and John Jorgensen and Ted Cole and Dorothy Walter and John Latimer. These were all people that had established camp careers, and they were incredibly encouraging. So I thought, you know what? If they think I can do it, I think I can do it. So fast forward, next year will be our 25th year. We have 100 acres on a couple of lakes. Ours is more or less that kind of traditional style camp program. A lot of water-based programs and canoe tripping. We run for a month, although there are shorter options, and then we run for a full 2 months over the summer. Our numbers aren't quite as big as yours, David. We would have in total about 350 campers. Now, within that group, there's about 60 doing a skill-based program for 16-year-olds, leadership, another 40 that do kind of a softer skills program, a bit younger, and then also an older leadership program as well. So we're heavily focused on leadership. We also have a pretty large international camper population. Last year, we had kids from 26 countries, including and staff. We're home to Camp Kavita for part of the summer, which is our national transplant camp for kids. So kids that are pre and post transplant, also run through Toronto's Hospital for Sick Kids. And then for many years, we've been a partner with Camp Jamoki, which is our national camp for kids with sickle cell disease. So traditional camp programs, but also heavily engaged with the medical community and especially that hospital in Toronto for sick kids. So different path getting here. We were excited and still are to celebrate 25 years next year. Amazing that it's been 25 years, but of course there are camps that are 90 and 100 years old. So we still we're very much still in that kind of, first chapter. So that's been that kind of career arc. And then just on a side note, much like Howie, I've had a pretty active role with organized camping. And so I'm the current president of our camping association in the province of Ontario with 450 camps. And I've just started last week, my 9th term with the International Camping Board. They have clearly no succession planning program, but I'm vice president. And so we're dealing with camps in 102 countries right now around the world. So it has been a journey from being a child going to camp to all these years later, still loving what we do, every minute of it.
Great. Well, I appreciate hearing a little bit about your background and where you are at now. That's so interesting to hear. I have more questions, but I have to stay on topic. So today we're talking about registration. And I know that Howie and I are really excited to talk about this because 2021 probably won't look like registration for 2019 and maybe what 2020 would have been or was for you. And I really am excited to talk about what changes we've made, maybe some we've had to make, but also maybe some things that have always been challenges for registration that we now are changing because of COVID. It's a good reason to do some of those things. So, but first let's talk about a little bit, if you'll both share how your summer was this year. So give us some insight into how 2020 went for each of you. Do you want to start, David?
Sure. It was not good. I'm a camp director. It's what I do, and I couldn't do it this year. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we were allowed to open by our governor, where in other states in the United States, they were not allowed, Massachusetts, New York. But we just ran out of time. Parents needed to make other decisions. as we were trying to get testing, and we did. We had testing ready to go. We were willing to spend the money. We had hired 2 staffs. We hired staff using the international agencies and being able to bring in staff from Mexico and Australia, New Zealand and England. And then that was not going to happen. So we rehired even more Americans. But at the end of the day, we chose that we just ran out of time. And so that we chose not to open. I've been here since June 6th. I'm still at camp. The lawns look beautiful. We cut the grass, we weed whacked. Everything felt so right inside, and I knew everything was so wrong outside our gates. The way I got through it emotionally was I came to the office every day. It's remarkable. I thought it was going to be the longest summer of my life. It actually wasn't. The summer went by pretty quickly. But what I didn't do was I didn't wake up and say, oh, today would have been Carnival Day, or today would have been Visiting Day. Although Visiting Day, I did recognize that one. But a lot of the other sort of traditions that happen at summer, I didn't want to, go down that rabbit hole. I had to live in a place of possibility of this is a blip in the career in my career as a camp director in Camp Starlight. Next summer is Camp Starlight's 75th anniversary summer. And that's what we're focusing. And so that's kind of what the summer really was about. We literally made no money this summer. We took in no income whatsoever, which is pretty disturbing. But we made it through and literally focused our attention on 2021.
It's interesting. The more and more that Kelly and I talk to camp operators who didn't run, we found ourselves at certain times in the calendar, just pivoting to finding some silver linings in what is otherwise sort of an unimaginable experience that we all had to face. And I think that you're referencing to that issue on the calendar. I do recall having my calendar notifications go up that today would be this theme day and this would happen. And, very quickly I turned off my notifications, but we had to do that. I'm curious, David, perhaps you could share with everybody a little bit about the support you got from your camp community in terms of your approach to registrations for 2020. We're talking to a lot of camp operators and getting a sense of, rollover and credit, refunds. How did that whole experience go for you, generally speaking, and the response you found from your camp community when you had to make the decision not to operate?
So coming from a world of 7-week camping, our return rate is well into the 90 percentile. So we have families that have been with us with 3 kids, for years and years and years. There's a trust factor that's been built. They were rooting for us, even if deep down they kind of were like, maybe David will make the decision no, so I don't have to make the decision because I'm not sure how I feel about it. Once we made the decision, the love and support was incredible. We were very, very intentional with the message that we sent out to our families and gave them very clear options. Without any judgment. You may have all your money back, you may roll over your deposit only, or you may roll over all the money that you've paid, which were 3 payments. There was only 1 payment left, which would have been May 1st. And anybody who we decided that the message that we wanted to make sure our parents understood was we are fine. We are financially fine. This camp has been here for 74 years. It will be here for another 74 years, 100 years, 200 years. So we made sure that we were able to make good on those that wanted their money back within 30 days. And so the summer of 2020 was put to bed by June 30th, where anybody who wanted their money back got their money back. And anybody who wanted to roll their money over, just the $3,000 deposit or everything that they had in, they had their money rolled over. We gave them a 5% thank you. We do not do any discounts at Starlight, so we don't do early enrollment discounts, but for in this instance, we gave them the opportunity that any money that rolled over would be applied to 2021 with a 5% thank you credit. And my phones were really, really quiet because they knew what the plan was. They knew what their options were. And everybody who rolled their money over, for us, it was like, they're committed. So in my mind, I had more people committed for 2021 on July 1st than ever before, because we don't do re-enrollment until September. So that was like a really good thing for us, going, wow, you know, we have 400 kids enrolled already for next
Right.
summer.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that I'm curious for everyone to hear Jeff's story of his summer as well, because you know, for us in Ontario, when we weren't permitted to operate, it presented some different challenges, etc. So Jeff, could you share with us, you know, what your summer was like, and some of the decisions related to registration and the things that you experienced last summer with everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's safe to say it was a roller coaster. What I didn't mention earlier, just in sort of the history of a short camp, we were only able to buy the property 3 years ago. And so that took everything we had of investments and savings and personal money to sort of secure the future for the camp. And then on top of that, we did a lot of development. And so as COVID sort of hits our country and North America and the world in March, I started thinking, oh, this could be a problem. And I frankly saw the whole thing kind of crumbling around me. But the roller coaster aspect was just initially the support we had from so many people. Our community kind of came together. We don't have generations and generations of alumni. We have a fairly 1-2 generation sort of camper system. Much like you, David, we have a high return rate. So there was a lot of support that camp will continue. Our sort of date that how we will relate to as well was May the 19th, a Tuesday at 1 o'clock, when our premier said no more. We weren't sure up until that point if we could operate or not. We were holding out hope. Maybe we can operate in mid-July. Maybe we'll go just for the month of August. You know, we kept thinking we'll do something. Maybe we can't go right away, but we'll do something this year so there'll be camp. And once that option was wiped away, we had to pivot. You know, what does next year look like? Let's do that quickly. So that day we were in touch with all of our families, let them know exactly where we were at. The decision was final. And we would do, as you said, David, all the options that people wanted, whatever you needed to do as a family, we'd support you doing it. Really quickly on site, we kind of took the same approach of, let's make the property and the space as great as it can be. And so we sort of saw it as an ultimate spring clean. You know, it's that storage building that you always do a good job putting away at the end of one season, but you never take everything out. So everything at camp had hands on it. We had some alumni that came up, some of our core full-time staff, and we just really went through camp and made it look as good as it could. One of our team said, we want everybody to come back next year and say, wow, you know, that's their first impression. This looks great. And that meant painting, and that meant staining, and that meant adjusting and fixing and replacing and improving. And so that became our goal this year, was just to really work hard on making the space look as good as it could and really sort of building towards next year. Something's worked out in our favor. We've always had, it's going to sound crazy, but we've always had an early July start date for registration the next year. And most people think I'm insane. But where that came from was an ACA conference, I think about 30 years ago in Pittsburgh. And there was a really well-known New York City day camp director. And he was talking about registration trends. And he got up and said, here's what you need to do. Do what I do. When those kids go home, they get 2 things. The first thing they get is they get a shirt, a brand new shirt they put on before they get in the bus. And it says, Mom and Dad, and on the back, send me back next year to Camp X. And holding in their hand is the registration form for next year. And so I always thought, what? And I kept thinking about it, and it made perfect sense, because what he was doing was capturing the enthusiasm for camp at its greatest point. So for us, we've always started early July. Now, it's another podcast about how that all works, because we have to do budget and organizing programs well in advance of that. So we started July 1st. We had the month of June for refunds. Any requests, let us know. We'll honor those, absolutely. And we ended up being 23% of monies collected was asked to be refunded. A number of those came from international families. Some were aging out of leadership programs. So it wasn't too bad. We felt pretty good about that. On July 1st, we offered a couple of things. We set up something called the Wenonah Champions Circle. And what we said was simply, we want to have you involved in camp for a long time. We value your family. And so what we'll do is we're going to hold fees, 2020 rates into 2021. And you may have one child at camp with us right now for a month. That child for life will get a 5% reduction discount on fees. And on top of that, we'll extend that to as long as that child wants to come to camp. They may want to go for the full summer. You may also have younger children. We'll extend that to them as well. So we set up this champion circle, and we had just over 400 families subscribe to that. So that for us was the foundation that we knew we could continue. So we did a couple of different things with registration too. I'm not sure how far ahead you want me to get with what we're going to talk about, but one thing we did was we said, we want you to come back to camp. And we realized that some of you in 2020 were really excited about that Polaris Skills Leadership Program. And although you should have done it in 2020, you may want to do it in 2021, and that's okay. So our registration team, we took the approach, as long as there's physically space in camp, we're going to take everybody and we're going to take it for what they want to do, and we'll adjust programs as we go. So for example, we've got a pre-leadership program for the month of July. 40 is our max. That's all we can take. We've got over 60. And so what we're doing now is readjusting programs, looking at different types of accommodation for next year. But the message was, we want you to come back, and we want you to come back and do what you'd like to do. And you know what, we're going to make it work. And parents were really happy to hear that whatever their kids wanted to do, it wasn't restrictive on our part. It wasn't, we only have 15 places in this program. Sorry, it doesn't work. So that worked out really well for us.
That's great.
David, did you make any changes for 2021 from what you would normally do or when you do registration?
So we got on a Zoom call right away with our upper senior boys and upper senior girls because they've been here for 7 or 8, 9 years. And we wanted to make sure that they understood that even though they might have an older sibling who's a senior in high school that didn't get to go to prom and didn't get to go to graduation, that we were going to create a special one-year only program called a super senior division, a new division, so that they had the things that were important to them that they missed out on, because it's camp and we can do what we want because it is camp. And they were very, very excited. So for next summer, we have now bumped just those 2 age groups. We have our upper seniors for our 15-year-olds, and now we have super seniors for our 16-year-olds, and then the super that age group that would have been what we call CAs, like a CIT program called Counselor Assistants. They can come back now at 17 years old, and we created a 1-month program for them. We've never done a 1-month program, a 1-month program for them because we know that they want to maybe work on college applications and do those kind of things the second half of the summer. So that's what we did. The only thing that we did differently in terms of re-enrollment, and remember, anybody that rolled over was automatically re-enrolled. So just the families that took money back, we waited an extra, I would say only 10 days. And so the initial email went out on the 1st of September instead of the 20th of August. And the deadline for guaranteed enrollment, as we call it, went from the 17th of September to October 1st.
I think this conversation about programmatic changes and how it impacts registrations is a really important one. And I think that, Kelly, you and I both know that a lot of camp directors are really thinking about every aspect of their program and how they can, in some cases, keep campers who may have aged out back in the camper ranks, and issues of double cohorting and things of that kind. I know, as also an overnight camp owner, and us over at Camp Walden in Canada, we have created a double cohort for our CITs, very similar to what David was describing. We're lucky enough to have the physical space to almost give this very unique group of campers their own unique experience, even physically at camp, because as we all know, especially in the overnight setting, that those last year or two of overnight camp, there's so many things they want to complete in their camper journey that so many of them needed to complete it. So it did take a lot of, for us, interesting marketing to do that. We hosted Zoom calls with parents. I don't think it'll come as anyone's surprise that a camper who missed out on their CIT year, their last year as a camper, of course wanted to return, where parents may have thought this would be a year where they didn't have to necessarily invest in camp and they could become staff the following year. We had this tension between the camper desire to continue as a camper and parents saying, well, why can't they just become staff? So it took a lot of good, healthy discussion why this experience would be so valuable, not only for the campers, but actually as their future role as staff to actually complete this journey and get the CIT. So I think this is a real fascinating sort of consideration when you think about registration and your entire program of how you can keep campers that otherwise may have aged out or in fact didn't get experiences that they anticipated they would get at our respective camps because the summer didn't afford them that opportunity. So I'm really interested. It's really interesting to hear how Jeff and David have navigated their very unique situations. I think that's super cool. David, you mentioned that, so there was a brief delay in when the launch of 2021 registration happened. And did you find, generally speaking, parents were eager to re-enroll? What was that experience? I mean, every family is dealing with the circumstances that COVID has provided. Of course, camp's a luxury, of course. What did you find, generally speaking? People were eager to jump on. They jumped right on this guaranteed enrollment period you had. How did that all go?
It went relatively the same way it goes every year. We don't pressure them. We have the Jewish holidays that are always involved with September. Most of my clientele happen to be from Jewish backgrounds, although we're not a religious camp, but so we leave them alone. And for me, and Allison, my wife, and my daughter Haley, the decision-making process and what we wanted everybody to understand was this was a blip. 2020, it happened and it's over, and normalcy is what everybody wants. There is no normalcy. So if we can say by next June, there will be normalcy, that's how we sort of dealt with everything. We didn't change our re-enrollment letters and sap them up too much. You know, we did put it that it was unlike it. We missed your children more than you could imagine, which was true. And then we moved on because I think that's what psychologically our families and children want. They want to move on. And, you know, if we were opening a December winter camp, I couldn't say that. But, you know, I think for all camp directors and all the camp directors that I speak to, time is on our side to get it figured out by next summer. And that's what parents want. And that's what campers want. And so we just tried to be as normal as possible. And
Yeah,
parents responded. I'm sorry.
No,
parents responded in the same normal way.
Yeah, it's such a great message because I think that for our listeners who have yet to start registration, and there's a great number of camps that haven't even begun the process of registration for 2021. I hear you saying, which is something that my wife Sari and I have tried to adopt over the last several weeks, is just a very committed message to optimism and confidence. And parents want to know that you're prepared to make it happen. We're optimistic that things will be much more in our favor than they were a year ago. And I think parents have, for at least our experience, have appreciated the fact that they know that for my wife and I assume for all of us on the call, that we're on this. Like, this is our mission, is to have these kids come back to camp. And I think parents really appreciate that. So, it's interesting to hear David talk about they kept things in terms of the registration process and their communication as typical as they could, so people just could get on board quickly. I thought that was great. Jeff,
I just want to say
David, please.
Let me just say one last thing, and then Jeff. This is what I've been talking to my friends who are camp directors and anyone who will listen. This is my soapbox, okay? Camp is magic. We all, as camp directors, want staff and families and campers to feel like we flick a light switch and it just happens. What happens, it's like the Wizard of Oz. What happens behind the curtain should not be their concern. We create magic for them. And we're sweating it out and we're figuring out how we're going to roll the money over and where's this going to come from and what are we going to do? But I think it's part of the magic of camp and our responsibility. That's for us to talk about. For them, flick the switch and make the magic happen.
Love that. Jeff, your thoughts on this last part of our conversation?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, how you've alluded to people that are still hesitating to start registration. And I wonder why. I mean, I think what we've got a chance to do right now is provide an incredible amount of hope for families of getting back to normal, of normal experiences. How many things kids have lost. Good friend of mine I played golf with a few weeks ago is a hockey coach for his son's team in Toronto, and they've lost their hockey season. And so the conversation came back to camp, but there's still camp. And so I think the messaging has to be that we're giving families hope, but we're not hoping to operate. We are going to operate, and we're going to operate. And that message is definitive and clear and purposeful. And we're doing everything we can do as we normally would to gear up for a summer season. And so we've just tried to be really laser focused on that idea that camp is running as usual. Maybe a few changes, we'll figure those out, but camp's coming, and get ready for it. And we've had such a good response from families around that. It hasn't been this wishy-washy message. You know, we hope we might run next year. We're not sure yet if we can do this. None of that. We're running. We're looking forward with purpose and intent, and we can't wait to get everybody back to camp. And we passionately believe that's what's happening. And our families have rallied around that as well. They desperately want camp to happen. It's not a casual connection with camp for our families. You know, it's not a, we'll try this for a year and go somewhere else. We have a high return rate. It's embedded in their families and their experience in their lives, and they can't wait for it. So yeah, we're doing the same thing. It's the soapbox idea, but let's get going. This is going to be great. We can't wait. Let's do the countdown. And we've had such good response to that. People are just delighted. So yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask what your response rate is. I talked with a camp yesterday, and they had said, you know, about 50 to 60% capacity this summer they ran, and they expect 70 to 80 this summer. So is that your experience, that you have about 70 to 80% capacity of what you typically have, or are you guys having the exact same amount of campers that typically enroll by this time enrolled?
Yeah, we'll start early. So usually by Labor Day, we're probably on average about 2/3 full for the next year. Then we start looking at new families. Right now, we just passed the 90% of capacity mark the other day. And I didn't think we'd ever be there. I honestly thought when we started July 1st, I thought, well, people will hold off. Even those rolling over, they may want to sort of be cautious. We've had literally one phone conversation from a mom who said, tell me about next year if things don't work out. Now, she's also a woman with her family that lives north of London, England. So it was travel and it was those aspects as well, but everybody else has been fully on board. So we're 90%. We're not sure we're gonna get a lot in the next few months. We think we've got committed those who are coming to camp. But at the same time, I think we had 2 or 3 interested new family inquiries yesterday. So that kind of boggles the mind when you think about it, that during a pandemic, people are making specific concrete plans for next July or August. But they're doing that and they're excited to do it. And so that hasn't changed. That interest, that excitement for camp, both from returning families and even new ones right now, it's there, it's palpable. So we're thrilled, we're delighted with it.
David, what's your percent capacity like right
So
now?
re-enrollment is spot on to where it normally is. The 17-year-olds with that 1-month program, they're holding back a little bit, and we're allowing them to do that because they're not used to coming to camp at all. It's really not a program for kids finishing their junior year of high school. The one difference that we had is that in Wayne County, so I'm in Wayne County, Pennsylvania. There's about 27 summer camps here in Wayne County. We're 2.5 hours from New York City. In a normal summer, we do over 100 tours during the summer of families who will come up for a weekend, see 2 camps on a Saturday, 2 on a Sunday. And we are normally filled for new kids by the end of July, beginning of August. We went from 110 tours to about 45 tours. So we were still doing tours with masks on and showing a camp with no action going on, which we've never done before. So what I've found is that the inquiry for new families, for those 2nd and 3rd graders, that's definitely behind. But of course, we have all the new kids that were supposed to be here in 2020. They're coming for 2021 as a first-time camper, plus the new ones from the tours. And then we are it's starting to pick up a little bit. I think, and from talking to a lot of my associates here in the States, is that it's going to be we're going to continue to hear in the 7-week market, we're going to continue to have inquiries well into the winter and the spring that we don't normally get.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm the outlier here. So Howie's opened, the two of you have opened. We don't typically open until the end of January. And we do priority registration. We have three phases basically. Priority, came to our mini camp, and then new families. And I've been thinking a lot about it. And for us, I don't think it will be registration as normal because we're going to change our sessions. We typically do sessions where kids can come 2 to 5 days for 8 weeks. And just with contact tracing and kids coming in and out of a day camp so much that I think we're going to have to move to a 1 to 2 week session option. And so it's going to be some drastic changes for us. And so I'm thinking a lot about, what comes first? The video to parents, we're opening, but it's going to look different. And here's our mission, here's what we're committed to. And then letting them see the different sessions and think about it, and then registering, but still doing that probably earlier than we normally would, because it will be such a different process. But I'm definitely in that ballpark of taking in and wanting to hear what other camps, what they changed, what worked, what didn't. And so I'm happy to hear that you're having a great response, like there really isn't a pandemic happening. So that's really good to hear.
And I think it's also really interesting, some of the differences that become quite glaring between the overnight camp and day camp operations of what we do. This consideration, and there's so many day camps in North America, particularly in the States, that do these options of days you can come during the week. And I think the equivalent for overnight camp, and I'm curious to hear what Jeff and David have to say about this, but if you did offer any short stay experiences, first time, come for a weekend or a 1 week inside your 7-week camp, have you guys considered whether that is being advertised, or if you do it, how have you changed that? Because I think that's almost the equivalent of what Kelly and I think of in the day camp space. I know for my overnight camp, I've got I'm really, really lucky to have a wonderful introductory transition program between my day camp and my overnight camp, where day campers spend 2 weeks at my day camp and with the same counselors get inserted into the last 2 months of the first 4-week session at my overnight camp. Parents are asking all kinds of questions. Hey, are you going to be able to introduce kids into your environment? And if your bubble is intact, how can you do this? I think there's a lot to unpack there, but generally speaking, have those been any considerations for you guys? Let's start with Jeff, and then David. Love to hear your thoughts on this if it applies.
We do have an introductory program called Wenonah. So Wenonah, but Wenonah for 5, 6, 7-year-olds, just 3 days. We run it 3 times in the same week. We've registered for that. We're watching that and thoughtfully and carefully whether we can actually do that or not. But it's a bit like David said earlier. I mean, I liken what we should do at camp to Disney. The excitement's up here, and then behind the scenes, underground, we'll figure it all out. So we're in the process of figuring that out. Part of what we've done the last few months, especially on site, has been a vigorous review of everything we do. And we've done it in such a way as if it was exactly the same conditions right now. We believe they'll get better. But if it was exactly the same conditions right now, how would we do it? How do we do meals? How do we do program and cohorting and you name it? So we're working on all that kind of stuff. Don't have a good answer about that short stay program yet. But if we can't do it, we can't do it. But our hope is to do it, and we're moving forward with that intent for sure. Just a bit early to tell, but again, churning underneath the water are all the different options happening right now for sure.
Amazing. David, do you have a short stay experience at Starlight of any kind?
We don't. Everybody comes for 7 weeks. How we would deal with tours next summer, because those, having people come in, that's going to be the real question, because that's selling for us. And then we have a couple of experiences where one of our tours goes into an evening activity and a barbecue and that kind of thing. But in terms of campers coming, everybody will come for the full 7 weeks, except those 17-year-olds for that CA program, but everyone would be arriving. So the idea would be sort of what the camps who were successful in this summer was creating the bubble and just trying to keep it intact. as much as possible.
So if you were to each summarize advice to camp owners who are still waiting to launch registration, I know we've gotten some tidbits, but I thought perhaps we could get, being the experienced camp leaders you are, and what you've experienced, can you each just give us, a couple or three sort of things that you encourage all camp owners to think about as if they're still waiting to launch their registration? David, immediately comes to, what comes to mind for that?
Stick to your plan, stick to the way that you've always done it, business as usual. Number two, do not get caught up in talking about what protocols are going to be for next June, because you don't know, because the government doesn't know, the CDC doesn't know, nobody knows. And for us as camp directors to say in October what it's going to be like next June, think about what we were all pivoting when COVID really hit at the beginning of March and what happened between March and June. By next June, there could be rapid tests that are $15 a piece and you can test people very easily. Who knows what's going to happen with the vaccines and whatever. The most important thing to know is that our clients are just as smart, if not smarter than we are. So you can't try to tell them something that you don't know about. Just be true to who you are and try to run as normal a business as you possibly can, because you need to know and be confident that your clients want your camp to open and know that it will just as much as you do.
That's great. Jeff?
Yeah, I would say all those same things. Stay the course. What's worked for you and why you're a successful camp. Stick to those basic principles of program, of timing, of everything you do to prepare for camp. Keep on track. Again, behind the scenes, we can be doing other work, and we're certainly doing that. Again, planning all those multiple outcomes. But again, I'm talking to our peers and colleagues who are so nervous to start registration, are worried. We get a lot of questions about, I don't think we can't fill the capacity next year. We don't know that. Based on what? And so, we don't know what it's going to look like. And so we might as well do what we've always done. And then if we're, again, forced in some way, shape, or form to change, we can scale back, and parents will understand that. But we're going forward with integrity and with intent on what we've always done. And I think people appreciate that it is business as usual as best we can. And I just think people need to start. I think that there's fear out there of just getting started. And I was fearful. I thought, what's going to happen? And what we found is people have just enveloped the experience. The one worry, I had a chat with a friend of mine who sends kids to a couple of different camps, and one started registration, one hasn't. And she said, the one that hasn't started, it's getting farther and farther removed from that experience in 2019 with nothing to look forward to for 2021. And she said, I've got two different kids here. One's excited, camp's all set, they're booked in, their friends are excited, they're all gonna be back together. The other one's kind of going, maybe there's no camp. Maybe it's not gonna happen. Why isn't it happening? And so I just think that's what people are gonna start doing, is looking at other options the longer you wait. So I can't encourage people strongly enough to move forward.
And I know that Kelly, you and I, in previous shows and with colleagues we've spoken to, I think a lot of camp owners have very, very upfront in their mind is, especially for those new families, to make it as comfortable financially as possible to get on board, right? People are very obviously money sensitive these days, and in the day camp space and in the overnight camp world, registration fees that are very nominal, promises of refunds, continued commitment to communication and updates. And I do agree with David, there will come a time where parents will want to know some details about your operation, but generally speaking, the message of we're all moving in the right direction confidently and optimistically and with purpose is really what's going to carry the day. But I know that in our case as a day camp, we've lowered our registration fee. We didn't want people to worry about money. And in a day and age where, if camps in your market or if camps in your general geographic vicinity start to unfortunately not operate anymore for a variety of different reasons, we want consumer confidence to still be high, that, you know, it's comfortable and safe to register and people are being responsible. And I think we all have, you know, these things in our mind too. And I guess it's very, you know, it's very market driven as well. But, you know, I know, Kelly, you and I have talked about a few of those things around making it just as easy as possible so we can onboard and get kids registered.
Yeah, I think it's a balance. You know, the camp director I talked to yesterday was like, you need to think of every headache you have and take those headaches and try to get rid of them this summer. And, you know, so his theory was, what's not working for you already, fix it and change it. This is the year to make those changes. But it's also that balance of having that consistency for parents and what they've come to know and the registration they've come to know and the process. And, you know, but so I think it is that balance of that vacation credit that just sucks time from you, or offering a check discount and entering the checks because your software doesn't have ACH. But I think it's definitely a balance. So it's good for me to hear both of those sides, and that you guys have seen great success with keeping things how they've been.
I was going to mention just really quick too. I mean, one thing we did do this year was, for the first time, introduced an installment payment plan. We've never done that before. It's been a deposit and a final payment, or it's been a pre-registration or prior to registration payment. And we've had a number of people really appreciate that option of just spreading out those payments. And so we heard that loud and clear, and we've had a good uptick on that for sure.
Amazing. Well, Kelly, this has been a wonderful conversation, and we're now at a part of our show that we all enjoy, and that is talking a little bit about what inspires us these days. And it's been a feature, as our listeners know, that have been really fun to talk about. Typically, we end each show off with something that's inspiring us right now. This could be a book, an article, a podcast, a documentary, a leadership quote, anything else that inspires us to be a better camp professional and a better person. So we've asked our guests to share an inspiration that they'd like to share. David, what's inspiring you these days? What would you like to share with the audience?
So I'm on the board of directors of Global Camps Africa, and Global Camps Africa, we provide summer camp experiences for some of the poorest children from the townships of Soweto. My daughter and I went over there in 2017. It was a life-changing experience for me. I've been there now 3 times. And this is not a pitch for the organization. What it is what's inspiring me is that they were able to pivot to a virtual experience, teaching math, teaching life skills to these kids who have nothing. They barely get one hot meal a day. And the one thing that I learned was that these kids who grow up in these townships, they do have a cell phone or a smartphone. And so through buying them data, they've been able to stay engaged with their campers and the community. And I actually subscribe. I get the lessons every day from Freedom Park, because that's one of the townships. And then there's Cliptown and all these various places. And the engagement has been so inspiring that the counselors, we call them Bocellis, that are in South Africa, and the leadership team there is able to, in a pandemic, in South Africa, in the townships of Soweto, make camp work. That is inspiring for me.
Amazing. Wonderful. Great organization. I am familiar with it, and I know Jeff is too. So, Jeff, what's inspiring you these days?
Well, I think the reading I'm doing right now is probably like all of us. It's the online newspapers and the reality of the world. I've got 7 words and then a really quick thought. The 7 words have kind of guided me for a long time in life. About 30 years ago, I did some work with United Way. And part of that work was leadership development, which was working with not-for-profit boards of directors. And we'd bring in a mentor from the community, and they in turn would do training on a module for the board. And so one of these training sessions that I was helping to was the dean of a local university, and was doing work with essentially a new Canadians organization. And it was a new board. And he said, I've got 7 words for you, and I want you to think about these words from a leadership standpoint. And today, perhaps more than ever, they're really ringing true. I'm getting a bit older. My 60th birthday is coming up in a few years. And I'm thinking more about succession and, well, my kids want to take over camp and, all the things that are important. The 7 words are: create something that can survive your departure. And I think especially in a year where we've had so much turmoil, that sort of sense of consistency with camp really rings true for me. If I can, fast little quote as well. At the end of camp every year, and of each of our months, for over 30 years now, I've always shared a thought, and it kind of captures sort of the essence of what we do at camp, I believe. And I've thought about this quote a lot because one of the things that keeps me going is I imagine being on that last misty morning by the lake and reading this thought. And that's just on the really bad days, I think about that and I think, yep, that's going to happen yet next July, and I can't wait. And here's the thought: just like an ever endless chain, a friendship lasts forever. Through thick and thin, through frown and grin, we guard it like a treasure. And though it goes through lots of harm, like dust and tarnish and rust, our secrets lend a kind of charm to the friendships that we trust. And though our homes are miles apart and only camp we all attend, with letters and songs and smiles from the heart, our friendship will never end. Love that thought. And I love it because I think all those people out there that are just waiting to get back to camp to renew those friendships, that's what we're doing this for. That's what this is all about. So it's only good things ahead, I believe.
Wonderful. Kelly, what do you have for us this week?
All right. Well, this morning I was on the Northland ACA virtual conference, and Kelly Freeridge from ACA National Marketing shared a video from Camp Ronald McDonald for Good Times. It was part of their giving campaign in December. So it's under, I think the date is December 3rd, 2019, they had on Facebook. And I'm not going to do it justice, so you need to go watch this video. I'll link it in the show notes. But it's this idea of a kid and an adult are going hiking in the mountain, and a kid trips. And he goes, oh. And the mountain replies back, oh. And the kid looks to the adult and like, what was that? And the adult says, that's what we call here an echo. And everything you put out into the earth comes right back to you. And, they just talked a lot about camp, of everything you put out will come right back to you. And it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful video. I thought it was so inspiring. So I will link it.
Please.
It's a feel good. It's a feel good if you need it today.
Right on. Thank you, Kelly. For me, I've been hooked on a Apple TV Plus series called Dear. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's a series where celebrities read letters written to them by people who they've inspired, and they've put together these half-hour, 45-minute pieces, and it's Oprah, and it's Lin-Manuel Miranda and Stevie Wonder, and in fact, it's also Big Bird, and people who've written letters to all of these people, and they read them, and you learn about their life. And it's such a feel-good kind of show to take in. I was thinking how you can relate that and inspire your staff through training if you actually try to create your own Dear program in camp, where perhaps past campers could submit letters to staff that are still with you and tell them how much they appreciated what they did. We do collect as camp owners, and we're very fortunate to get a collection, and I'm sure we all have a file and a spot in our folder on our Outlook or whatever where we keep wonderful letters. I just feel there's a real camp connection to this show and how we can inspire our staff. And in a summer where we're going to ask more of our staff than ever, and kudos to the staff that worked camps in 2020. I think they're heroes in so many ways. I think the staff for 2021 coming back are going to give so much. I think they need to perhaps get primed about the impact they have more in 2021 than perhaps any summer where we run camp. So it's a great show. Check it out. It's called Dear. What do you think, Kelly?
Awesome, Howie. I'm going to have to check that out. I have not heard of that one yet. So if we would like to hear more about that or get information from any of our camps today, we want our listeners to be able to know how they can reach us. So Jeff, how can our listeners reach you if they want to follow up or ask questions about some of the great work you do?
Sure. Email's easiest. Jeff, JFF at campwenonah.com. Sorry, Wenonah is WENONAH. So Jeff at campwenonah.com.
Okay. David, what about you?
Email as well, David at Camp Starlight, CampStarlight.com.
Awesome. And you can reach me at howie@camprobinhood.ca.
And I am Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com. Please do not forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/COP. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff there from our show and other Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. We hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Jeff and David. Howie, always a pleasure. And thanks to everyone for listening.